My countdown. Hello, everyone. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is Dump the Corruption. It's the only way out. It's the only way out of all the hot water the United States is in. I want to illustrate this by going through a relatively small number of articles that we wouldn't even, with a subject matter, would not even have to concern us if there had been a successful Dump the Corruption campaign in 2020 and in 2022. It will be obvious to everyone as I go through these articles that the issues we're dealing with today we wouldn't have had to deal with at all if Dump the Corruption had been in place in time for the election of 2020. So I thought that would be interesting for us to go over. I'll be with you in just a minute, to do that. But I want to share this broadcast, the stream, I should say, on Facebook. Okay, that's done. So let me share the first article. This is some news from Cornel West. I consider it to be regrettable news. Regrettable news. Here's Cornel. Of course, he's running as an independent candidate for the presidency. This picture is him campaigning for Bernie Sanders in the 2020 race. The headline is, and I believe, I picked this up from Common Dreams. The headline is, Cornel West defends accepting campaign cash from right-wing billionaire Harlan Crow. Harlan Crow, of course, is the billionaire who's been funding Clarence Thomas, the notorious Supreme Court justice, for years. And Cornel says, despite my deep political differences with brother Harlan Crow, who is an anti-Trump Republican, I've known him in a non-political setting for some years, and I pray for his precious family, said the presidential candidate. This article was written by Jessica Corbett, October 19th, 2023. Of course, Cornel West was criticized for taking the contribution. But beginning the article, independent U.S. presidential candidate, progressive scholar Cornel West, on Thursday responded to criticism he is facing for taking money from billionaire GOP mega donor Harlan Crow, known for lavishing right-wing U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas with gifts. After reviewing Federal Election Commission filings, NBC News on Wednesday reported on Crow's August donation of $3,300, the maximum that an individual can directly give to a campaign. Cornell says, as an independent candidate and a free black man, I accept donations within the limits of no PACs or corporate interest groups that have strings attached. West wrote Thursday on X, formerly Twitter, I am unbought and unbossed. Despite my deep political differences with Brother Harlan Crow, who is an anti-Trump Republican, I've known him in a non-political setting for some years, and I pray for his precious family, unquote. Former President Donald Trump is the Republican frontrunner based on polling. Despite his multiple criminal indictments and arguments, he is constitutionally disqualified from holding office again. Quote, I find it hypocritical for those who highlight his $3,300 donation to my campaign, but can't say a mumbling word about the PAC-driven $1 billion to support the genocidal attack in Gaza sponsored by their candidate, unquote, West added, pointing to Israel's ongoing assault of the Strip. Quote, I'm fighting for truth, justice, and love. Onward, unquote. Okay, I think I can dispense with this very quickly. Okay, I'm not going to go through the whole article. Okay, here is my point, okay, about this. If people base their campaigns on donations over $200, they are subject to corruption. They are, because if everybody gave them $200 or more, then such candidates would, of course, be beholden to the class of people who can contribute more than $200 to a campaign. That is a form of corruption too. It may not be as bad as taking money from corporate PACs. It may not be as bad as failing to repudiate super PAC money. It may not be as bad as taking money from party committees or from corporations directly. But someone who takes more than $200 in donations from many people is still not someone who is likely to be concerned with the interests of labor, the interests, of poor people, the interests of the have-nots in general. Now, I know Cornel West can cite his record and his career and his long-time concern for the poor. But my point is, during this period of time, he was not getting $3,300 donations from billionaires. He shouldn't be taking those. He shouldn't be taking those. There's a general principle involved here. Why should we make an exception for Cornel West? Why did he take the $3,300 in donations? It just doesn't mean that much, but it does indicate that he will make exceptions to principle even in situations where the amount of money that's accepted does not in itself really mean very much. I'm not objecting to his taking this one $3,300 donation, if that's all there are. But I think this indicates his willingness to generally take donations greater than $200 from people who want to support him. I have shared this sufficiently often in these particular Dump the Corruption programs, but still, okay, I'm going to show this again. I'm going to share the screen. For the rule. Here's the rule that the Dump the Corruption campaign wants every voter to follow. Vote against every candidate except those who won't take money from wealthy corporations, individuals, PACs, or party committees, and who repudiate all super PAC support. Cornel West has indicated his willingness to take money from individuals who are wealthy, even from individuals who are billionaires. That is unacceptable. Cornel West has now put himself in the same category, as Bobby Kennedy, who is also taking large contributions from individuals, who were very wealthy. Before this, Cornel West could claim a distinction, from Bobby Kennedy in terms of who he was taking money from. Now, he can no longer do it. I think that's a big mistake. And I think that it's a reason, to vote against him. Now, one still might not want to vote against him if one looks at other presidential candidates like Joe Biden, Donald Trump, also Bobby Kennedy. Maybe Cornel West, is the least offender of all those. So still, he might be the person that one would want to vote for. But what I'm saying is, I think this is a blow. I don't think it should be accepted without any protest. I don't accept his excuses, in these instances. I just don't. I don't think you compromise a principle for $3,300. Hey, Steve Wolfbrandt, how are you doing? Steve says, hello, everybody. Kay says, hi, all. Steve says, hi, Kay. Steve says, people are a little burnt after giving their $27 to Bernie. Yes, I am one of those who gave more than $27 to Bernie. I gave a bunch of small contributions. Probably Bonnie and I gave as much as $200 in toto over a period of months, maybe more than that. We never did keep track of it. All we knew is that we were giving small contributions to Bernie time and time again. And I'll tell you, when he dropped out in 2020, I was infuriated by his dropping out, and I remain infuriated. He claimed he was running a not me, us movement. But when it came to dropping out of the campaign, he didn't even try to consult us. So I've always resented that. He could have polled the us. And he could have found out whether we wanted him to continue. Given the financial support that he was given, by most of us with our small donations, he owed us a poll to see what we thought about his dropping out of the campaign. And I'm not going to change that opinion. I will think that to the day I die. Okay, I'll now share the screen. For the next thing I want to gripe about, this is about the Middle East, of course. And here's Netanyahu and Biden shaking hands on September 20th, 2023. 2/3 of American voters want the U.S. to back ceasefire in Gaza. 2/3 of the American voters. Quote, "It's past time for our political leaders to listen to their constituents and put a stop to this violence," said a Jewish American advocacy group. This article was written by Jake Johnson. Today, most members of the U.S. Congress have thus far refused to support a ceasefire in Gaza as Israel's siege and airstrikes inflict horrific damage on the occupied territory. But according to a Data for Progress survey, boy, they're right on the money with this, really Johnny on the spot, released Friday, the tiny fraction of Congress that has backed the ceasefire is more in line with the views of U.S. voters than the overwhelming majority of lawmakers in the House and Senate and President Joe Biden. Okay. The polls show 66% of likely voters agree that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza and, quote, leverage its close diplomatic relationship with Israel to prevent further violence and civilian deaths. Before I go on with the rest of the article, I want to point out the connection to Dump the Corruption. If Dump the Corruption had been a powerful movement in 2020, using the same rule you just saw, then neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden would have been elected president of the United States. Moreover, the whole House of Representatives would have been turned out because every one of them was taking big money. Every one of them was violating the rule that I specified here, that you just saw. Every one of them, they all would be out. Okay, you just read, or I just read, that the tiny fraction of Congress that has backed a ceasefire is more in line with the views of U.S. voters than the overwhelming majority of lawmakers in the House and Senate and President Joe Biden. If Dump the Corruption had been a serious movement in 2020, the overwhelming majority of lawmakers in the House and Senate wouldn't have been there. And President Joe Biden wouldn't have been there also. The people who would have been there would have been candidates who didn't take any big money, including big money from the military-industrial complex or the fossil fuel industrial complex or the medical industrial complex. None of those candidates would have taken any big money from all of those. And if you think they wouldn't have been listening to their voters when it came to Gaza, I think you're sadly mistaken, about that. Of course they would have been listening to their voters, because A serious dump the corruption campaign in 2020 would have made it clear to them that nobody was going to win again if they took any big money. And by 2022, the point would have been made twice over. And we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. There would have been no Ukraine, people. And there would have been no Gaza. And there would be no foreign policy trying to surround China in order to stop the economic development, of China. None of that would be happening right now. Going on with the article. If not now, a Jewish American group that had helped organize major demonstrations in support of a ceasefire this week said, in response to the survey, that, quote, it's past time for our political leaders to listen to their constituents and put a stop to this violence, unquote. But they won't do it because so many of them, are bought. Let's be quite clear, about this. We're coming up on the 2024 election. If Dump the Corruption is a serious movement by that time, it's going to put a stop to this terrible foreign policy that this administration has been following, or to the terrible foreign policy that Donald Trump is likely to follow. Because both administrations, even though they're different with respect to Ukraine, both administrations were creating crises in the Middle East and wanted to create crises in Asia, with China. Neither Trump nor Biden has foreign policies that would be acceptable. They have those foreign policies, not only because they are who they are as people, but also because their donors find those policies to be acceptable and even prefer those policies when they have financial advantage to gain. So the Data for Progress survey showed voters across party lines agreed the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. And we see that among the Democrats, support is 80% for the statement that the U.S. should call for a ceasefire and de-escalation of violence in Gaza. And the U.S. should leverage a close diplomatic relationship with Israel to prevent further violence and civilian deaths, unquote. 80% of Democrats want that. 57% of independent third party want that. 56% of Republicans want that. And the average 60% of all voters want that, which is 2/3 of all voters. But it's 4/5 of the Democratic voters that Biden is supposed to be listening to in particular. But of course, what the voters think does not matter anymore, because the donors are calling the tune. And the donors want Biden to defend Israel to the last American. That's probably something of an exaggeration. But I think the donors are willing to accept very extreme actions by the United States to try to protect Israel. Why is that in the interest of the United States? It is not in the national interest of the United States. It's in the interests, of some of the donors who command fortunes. On Monday, a group of 13 House progressives, led by Representatives Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib, introduced a resolution urging the Biden administration to support a ceasefire to, quote, save Israeli and Palestinian lives, unquote. Several additional Democrats, including Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal, have signed on to the resolution since its introduction, bringing the total number of backers to 18. But that desire for a ceasefire remains marginal in Congress, something that activists and a growing number of Capitol Hill staffers are working to change. More than 400 Muslim, Jewish, and allied congressional staffers have signed an open letter calling on their bosses to, quote, join calls for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. On Thursday, more than 260 former staffers from Senator Elizabeth Warren's 2020 presidential campaign released an open letter imploring the senator to, quote, demand an immediate ceasefire in Palestine, the return of Israeli hostages, and take concrete steps to end the Israeli occupation, unquote. In its attacks against Palestinians in Gaza, Israel has demonstrated a brazen disregard for human life, with some officials going as far as to make their genocidal intent public, and has broken international law repeatedly. Major humanitarian organizations, such as Doctors Without Borders, and human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, agree 2 million people in Gaza, half of whom are children, are experiencing collective punishment, and all people of conscience must call loudly and vociferously for a ceasefire. Okay, that's all I'm going to read. This, you get the point. We wouldn't even be dealing with this particular situation if neither Biden nor Trump were the president of the United States at this time, and if the president of the United States was someone who would not been taking substantial money from the various sources that were identified in the rule that I showed. Someone winning with a small dollar donation campaign would have been free to look at these issues objectively, would have been able to see that the Palestinians have rights, that Israel might have, that even though Israel certainly has a right to self-defense, Israel doesn't have a right to occupation, doesn't have a right to violate the human rights of the Palestinians. It doesn't have the right to commit a genocide on the Palestinians. And the Palestinians have a right to resist the occupation themselves, under international law. People are angry at the violations of human rights by Hamas. But Hamas had the right to attack Israel because it had a right to resist on behalf, of the Palestinians. We might not like their style. We might even think their style is a violation of human rights. But after spending 16 years in an open-air prison, totally shut down, How would we feel if we were in that particular situation? Let us not forget that the Israeli kibbutzes that were on the border or close to the border, okay, of Gaza do not contain only civilians. They contain reservists who can be called up at a moment's notice by the Israeli government to serve, okay, in the military, and who were trained as military people and who served, okay, in the military people. The people who condemn the Hamas attacks, oh, they attacked civilians. They were not pure civilians. Israel is a nation in arms. Everybody can be called up at any time by the government. Even if the training of the people is not completely up to date, look what they did. They called 360,000 people up in this short time, assembled an army of 360,000, getting them ready for an invasion, okay, of Gaza. Took them almost no time at all. How long would it take the United States to mobilize an army of 360,000 people? Saying those civilians were not pure civilians. There's a gray area here. There's a gray area here. Of course, some of the hostages were purely civilians. I agree. There is that. But it is unfair to condemn Hamas so much for doing that when we don't condemn for the Israelis who are committing daily atrocities against the Palestinians in the West Bank. Anyway, I've said enough about this. My main point here is that the person whose foreign policy is resulting in the support of the Israelis in this manner would not have been the president if there were a dump the corruption campaign in 2020. And the congressional people who are supporting the president in this would not have been in the Congress in 2021, 2022, 2023, unless they reformed and ran only with small dollar donations. So, I didn't want to make that point. Now we can move on to the next piece that we've been dealing with. I picked this one up from Los Angeles Progressive. It's a piece by Thom Hartmann. It's called Pay Attention. Medicare Advantage is a scam. The Advantage scammers will be carpet bombing America with advertisements over the next few months. Don't be fooled. This is from October 10th, 2023. So, why do I pick this one out? Well, we are dealing with Medicare Advantage scammers. But if there had been a dump the corruption campaign in 2020 and 2022, there would be no Medicare Advantage right now. It would not exist because Medicare for All would have been passed. 70% of the American voters are for Medicare for All. If we had a Congress that was independent of donors and dependent only on small donors and voters, they would have passed Medicare for All because 70% of their voters were in favor of it. Passing Medicare for All would have been overwhelming. We wouldn't have to face the scam of Medicare Advantage right now, which we are facing. Cartoon saying, "So sorry, that's not covered." Nice cartoon. Somebody being slammed with a baseball bat by Medicare Advantage programs. President George W. Bush and Republicans and a handful of on-the-take Democrats in Congress created the Medicare Advantage scam in 2003 as a way of routing hundreds of billions of taxpayer dollars into the pockets of nonprofit insurance companies. Those companies and their executives then recycle some of that profit back into politicians' pockets via the Citizens United legalized bribery loophole created by 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court. Yep, that's what they did. Just the overcharges happening right now in that scheme are costing Americans over $140 billion a year, more than the entire budget for the Medicare Part B or Part D programs. These rip-offs that our federal government seems to have no interest in stopping are draining the Medicare Trust Fund while ensnaring gullible seniors in private insurance programs where they're often denied life-saving care. Yes. There's no trust fund, really. In other words, there's no place where there's a bank account and there's money and that bank account actually belongs, to Medicare. There is only an accounting record that says that the Treasury Department owes to Medicare the surplus that was built up over the years since the 1980s because the Medicare taxes exceeded the spending for Medicare since I guess that trust fund was started probably in 1983 or 1982. Okay, it was a result of the compromise that President Reagan made with Tip O'Neill, of the Democrats, when Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House. A real Medicare pays bills when they're presented. Medicare Advantage insurance companies, on the other hand, get a fixed dollar amount every year for each of the people enrolled in their programs, regardless of how much they spent, on each customer. For somebody like me, for example, the amount that comes from Medicare to cover me, well, I can't, tell exactly because I haven't actually seen, my particular record. But given the kind of disability I have, it's probably something like $36,000 a year for me that is coming from Medicare to Kaiser that has me in a Medicare Advantage program. Now you might say, why, am I in that program? Well, I'm in that program because I had been with Kaiser for many years. All my doctors are there. The service was good, up until now. And Kaiser took away the Medicare Costs Plus program they had, and I had no choice but to either join the Medicare Advantage program or get out of Kaiser. I didn't want to get out of Kaiser because I was very happy with the service that Kaiser had provided up until this time. I have to say, though, that I do have a fear that somewhere down the line, I may run up against, okay, a denial of service from Kaiser, okay, or most probably, okay, a denial of some drug that I might need because of the profit incentive that exists in the Medicare Advantage program. Anyway, going on. As a result, the Medicare Advantage programs make the greatest profits for their CEOs and shareholders when they actively refuse to pay for care, something that happens frequently. It's a safe bet that nearly 100% of the people who sign up for Advantage programs don't know this, don't have any idea how badly screwed they could be if they get seriously ill. Not only that, when people do figure out they've been duped and try to get back on real Medicare, same insurance companies often punish them by refusing to write a Medigap plan that fills in the 20% hole in real Medicare. They can't do that when you first sign up when you turn 65, but if you leave the real Medicare program for privatized, for a privatized type Medicare Advantage program, can be damn hard to get back on it. Doctors Group, Physicians for National Health Program, just published a shocking report on the extent of the Medicare Advantage ripoffs, both to individual customers and to Medicare itself, that every American should know about. The report, titled Our Payments, Their Profits, opens with this shocking expose. By our estimate, and based on 2022 spending, a Medicare Advantage overcharges taxpayers by a minimum of 22%, or $88 billion per year, and potentially by up to 35%, or $140 billion. By comparison, Part B premiums in 2022 totaled $131 billion, and overall federal spending on Part D drug benefits cost approximately $126 billion. Either of these or other crucial aspects of Medicare and Medicaid could be funded entirely by eliminating overcharges in the Medicare Advantage program, unquote. Is that an unquote? Yes, that's an unquote. Okay, so Medicare Advantage, also known as MA or Medicare Part C, is a privately administered insurance program that uses a capitated payment structure as opposed to the fee-for-service structure of traditional Medicare or TM. Instead of paying directly for the health care of beneficiaries, the federal government gives a lump sum of money to a third party, generally a commercial insurer, to manage, quote-unquote, patient care. With real Medicare and a Medigap plan, you talk with your physician or hospital, decide on your treatment. They bill Medicare, and you never see or hear about the bill. There's nobody between you and your physician or hospital, and Medicare only goes after the payment they've made if they sniff out a fraud. With Medicare Advantage, on the other hand, your insurance company gets a lump sum payment from Medicare every year, keeps the difference between what they get and what they pay out. They then insert themselves between you and your doctor or hospital to avoid paying for whatever they can. Now, I don't know if Kaiser operates in this way, and I don't want to make an accusation where I don't know what the facts are. But I'm afraid there's some advantage for Kaiser to do that, some incentive, for Kaiser to do that. And they may be doing that in certain ways. And just raise, the possibility. I know Kaiser profits, are at an all-time high, and they do have an incentive, to make profits. And they may be among those who are denying certain kinds of services, certain kinds, of drugs, standing between you and your Kaiser doctor as to what the treatment should be for your health problem. Whatever you decide on regarding treatment, many Advantage insurance companies will regularly second guess and do everything they can to intimidate you into paying yourself out of pocket. Often they simply refuse payment and wait for you to file a complaint against them. If people seriously ill, the cumbersome appeals process, quote unquote, is often more than they can handle. Now, to be fair, I have never experienced this from the Kaiser Mid Atlantic plan. Okay, uh, we only paid out of pocket the amount we expected, okay, to pay out of pocket. Generally, there are no surprise billings as yet. I hope that continues. As a result, hospitals and doctor groups across the nations are refuse to take Medicare Advantage payments. California-based Scripps Health, for example, cares for around 30,000 on Medicare and recently notified all of them that Scripps will no longer offer medical services to them unless they pay out of pocket or revert back to real Medicare. They made this decision because over 75 million worth of services and procedures their physicians had recommended to their patients were turned down by Medicare Advantage insurance companies. In many cases, Scripps had already provided the care and is now stuck with the bills that the Advantage companies refused to pay. Scripps CEO Chris Van Gorder said to MedPage Today, "We are a patient care organization and not a patient but denial organization. And in many ways, the model of managed care has always been about denying or delaying care, at least economically. That is why denials, authorizations, and administrative processes have become a very big issue for physicians and hospitals. Similarly, the Mayo Clinic has warned its customers in Florida and Arizona they won't accept Medicare Advantage anymore either. Increasing numbers of physician groups and hospitals are simply over being ripped off by Advantage insurance companies. Not only is the Medicare Advantage scam a screw job for healthcare providers and people who are on the programs and are unfortunate enough to get sick, it's also preventing Americans from getting expanded benefits from real Medicare. As the PNHP report knows, for real Medicare to provide comprehensive vision, dental, and hearing benefits to all Medicare recipients would cost the system about $84 billion a year. Instead, though, the Medicare system is burdened with at least that amount of money in overpayments to Medicare Advantage providers, overpayments that have no health benefit whatsoever and merely inflate the company's profits. Okay, I'm going to stop with this now, but you get the point. I urge you to read the rest of this. The scam, is going on. It's costing $140 billion a year. So that's that. This article originally appeared in Common Dreams. Okay, the final piece of the night is also from Common Dreams, but it's directly from Common Dreams. Let me share that with you. I find this totally outrageous. This is graphic of Paxlovid, specifically Nirmatrelvir tablets. Also Ritonavir tablets, co-packaged for oral use. The two together constitute the Paxlovid treatment defined by Kaiser. It's a 3-pill dose of COVID-19 that sits atop a box of the drug on May 25th, 2023. Quote, "For shame," unquote, Pfizer to charge $1,390 for life-saving COVID drug that costs just $13. So they're making more than $100, 100 times over the cost. But not 100% over the cost, but 100 times over the cost. Pfizer treats Paxlovid like a Prada handbag, a luxury for the few rather than a treatment for the many, unquote, said one consumer advocate. Again, if Medicare for All had been passed in 2021 by a new Congress that had been put in due to a Dump the Corruption campaign, we would have had Medicare for All, and Medicare for All would be negotiating with Kaiser for the Paxlovid drug and would be able to cut down on outrageous costs, okay, like this. This article is by Brett Wilkins, October 19th, 2023. U.S. consumer watchdog Public Citizen on Thursday excoriated Pfizer after the pharmaceutical giant announced it would more than double the price of life-saving COVID-19 treatment, which will soon sell for an estimated 100 times the cost, of production. So, if it's doubling it and it's 100 times the cost, of production, even last year, it was getting 50 times the cost, of production. I mean, that was excessive too. Pfizer said Wednesday it will price its patented COVID treatment sold under the brand name Paxlovid at $1,390 for a 5-day course. Researchers, specifically Melissa J. Barber and Zintar's Gotham, recently estimated it cost Pfizer $13 to produce 5 days worth of the drug, which is taken in 3-pill doses. Pfizer's new price is an estimated 100 times the cost of actually producing the drug. Peter Maybar-Duke, Director of Public Citizens Access to Medicines Program, said in a statement, it's also more than 2.5 times the federal government's purchase price for Paxlovid. The government has bought and distributed the antiviral drug to the public free of charge since December 2021, when the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved the treatment. Starting next year, Pfizer will sell Paxlovid directly to health insurance companies. So Bonnie had COVID back in May. She was treated with the Paxlovid drug free of charge. I don't know if it had any effect on her or not. I don't know if it's really an effective drug. I don't know what the evidence is that it's more effective than, for example, ivermectin, or a drug like that. But she had it, and it was free. But now suddenly the insurance companies are going to be able to charge for it. So the next time she or I has COVID, they're going to have to pay a sizable amount for that particular treatment. Now notice, the government has march-in rights on all patents. It can march in, it can take over the production of Paxlovid, and then it can charge a reasonable price to the public or make it available for free. But of course, Joe Biden says under him, nothing will fundamentally change. So there we are. If he had not been elected in 2020, and if he is not elected in 2024, and if Trump is also not elected in 2024, if there's Dump the Corruption in 2024, then In 2025, a new president may come in, and if the public wants him to, he may exercise the march-in rights of the federal government to stop the Pfizer company from charging 100 times its cost for this particular that drug. So, okay, we'll see what happens, but this is up to you. This is up to the voters. If we do dump the corruption, as I am advocating, the power of the drug companies to do this kind of outrageous charging will be constrained, severely constrained. In addition to Paxlovid, Pfizer manufactures one of the two available mRNA vaccines for COVID-19. The company reported $56 billion in sales of its COVID-19 vaccine in Paxlovid last year. However, projecting a sales slump in 2023, Pfizer late last year announced a plan to significantly hike the price of its publicly funded COVID-19 shot. Now, I'm not a partisan of that COVID-19 shot. I think that current research is showing very serious problems with these types of vaccines. I'm not personally opposed to vaccines. We were offered a vaccine today for the RSV, but that's now circulating around. We're going to do that vaccine. Why are we going to do it? Because it's an old style vaccine. It's based on technology that we believe is safe. So we're going to take that vaccine. But we're not taking the mRNA vaccines for COVID-19 anymore, because we understand that the current research is now showing that you have a greater chance of getting COVID the more booster shots you take. Now, we have had 4 shots already. We don't want to increase our chances of getting COVID again anymore. So we have made that particular decision for ourselves. But of course, the main point with respect to this article and with respect to the other article, in the Medicare, in the healthcare field, we wouldn't be having these problems if we had a Dump the Corruption campaign sweeping the country in 2020 or 2022. And if we want to get rid of these problems, the foreign policy problems, the general problem of the lack of accountability of our office holders to the people, we got to do Dump the Corruption. It's the only way out. And on that note, I've said what I have to say for tonight. I will briefly go over your comments. But here we go. Steve Wolfman, people a little burnt after giving their $27. Robert Copeland says, I don't think Dump the Corruption will work quite often. If you follow Dump the Corruption, sometimes you could be voting for someone you don't like or not vote, in that particular political work. Robert, nothing works all the time. The question is whether Dump the Corruption will work. to prevent people who were taking the big money from being in Congress. If it works for that, you might be voting for somebody you don't like, or you might not vote, okay, in a political race, but at least the person who gets into office will not be bought and will have an incentive to represent you. If you want to have a clean system that is representative, you have to stop thinking of this, like an individual. I want to vote for a person I like. It's not about whether you like the person or don't like the person, or at least that's secondary. The primary consideration is whether the person you like is bought or not. If they're bought, you should not be liking them. That is what I'm saying, because we need a Congress that represents the people and not the donors. Jesus. If one person takes only 50,000 from AIDS Healthcare Foundation and the other person takes 40,000 from Blackstone, I will be voting for the person that takes the 50,000. That's fine, Robert. I mean, there are exceptions to every rule. The example you just stated makes sense, okay, to me, because 50,000 from AIDS Healthcare Foundation is a lot better than 40,000 from Blackstone. Yeah. It's better to be bought by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation than to be bought, okay, by Blackstone. I agree with that anyway. Don Marcel says Joseph M. Firestone. Hi, Don. Bernie Sanders, the most consequential politician. Brandy says, hello, all. Hello, Brandy. An interesting perspective. And Mark Collins gives a YouTube link. And Mark Collins says, M4A. Robert Copeland says, one of the biggest unions say they support Medicare for all endorse President Biden, and that case NNU. Yes. And of course, that's a problem. That's a real problem. It's a problem that NNU caved. They caved. They got to stop the caving. Mark Collins says the U.S. sees Israel's unsinkable aircraft. Israelis see Americans as an inferior species. Well, I think it depends on which Israelis you're talking to. Certainly, the right-wing Israelis, the Israeli nuts, do see Americans, okay, as an inferior species. They see everybody as an inferior species. They're fascists. Robert Copeland says, I had to fight against Anthem Blue Cross to get my high blood pressure medication. Sure. I haven't seen that happen, okay, with Kaiser. Robert Copeland says, NNU endorsed President Biden for the 2020. And I know they did. I'm outraged that they did. Kay says, okay, all, I'm out of here for tonight. Okay, I love you all. And Brandy says, but Dan is running against Tom Cotton again. Dan, okay, is Dan Whitfield. But if he is running as a Dem, they will screw him again. Yeah, I agree. If he's running as a Dem, they're going to screw him again because they'd rather see that louse, that complete corrupt Tom Cotton than see someone like Dan Whitfield, who's a decent person, come into office. Because a decent person might fight for the people instead, okay, of fighting for the donors. I believe Dan Whitfield will take only small contributions, small dollar donations. And if elected, he will work for the people. So, folks, it's time for me to go. It is now 10:06 p.m. Hope you like this stream. Hope you stop by my Patreon account, which is right under my chin right now, or my Buy Me a Coffee account that is running across the stream. Thanks for coming tonight, and thanks for your comments. And I may see you over the weekend at one of the D. Pierce streams. KL says, thanks, Joe. Thank you, KL. Robert Copeland says, isn't Tom Cotton a MAGA politician? Yes, that worm is a MAGA politician. He certainly is. If he got into office, he'd be worse than most MAGAs. Of course, he's already in office. If he got into office again, I mean, dump the corruption is perfect for him. Anyway, it's time for me to say goodnight. So again, thank you for coming. And please either buy me a coffee or make a donation to my Patreon account. And thanks again for coming.